Geologic is a board game which is designed to kind of be a versatile geological learning and teaching tool. And today's presentation, I just thought I'd run you a little bit through the thought process and the artistic process in creating the game, and then just present the game really and explain how it's played, what it's meant to do, kind of where we are now and what we're thinking to do as we move ahead, and then a little bit of pedagogic theory on the use of educational games, and is there any point to using this, or is it kind of just amusing? So why did I decide to make a game? Well, this was back in 2020. I did my pedagogic training as part of the as part of the university to teach at university, and we were off quite far away on a seminar, and we were asked to find some sort of pedagogic article that we could present to our group. So this was a group composed of people from everywhere, biologists, lawyers, and so on. And I randomly Googled, and I thought maybe I could look up something with a game, because it's kind of, I enjoy playing games and I think it's a fun part of teaching. So I found an article which was describing quite a complex game that was designed to teach taphonomy, like the burial and preservation of fossils. And then there was a long bus ride home as I sat thinking about this article that I had presented to the others, and I realized it was really fun. It was great, and it was it was very ambitious, and it was a fun way to do something different in a lab to try and teach a concept. But of course, this game taught just this one very particular concept. So there was a lot of time and energy that went into making something that could only be used once and for one very specific purpose. So I thought maybe I can design a game that's much more versatile. So I can design a game that's fun, but that it can be actually played at different levels. Maybe we can play it both from, have a version where you can play it when you're 3 years old, and one for when you're starting as a bachelor student, and one for, even advanced PhD students who are trying to, who know really complex issues and so on. And at the same time, obviously, I wanted there to be other aspects in this. So not just, I didn't just want to have fun. I thought it was really important to have this be part of, generating a better group dynamic within a study group, within a classroom, and teach, or try and do more collaboration, communication, and all these positive benefits. And then something that maybe you could actually use as a tool. My main goal was really to use it to maybe for the teacher to be able to assess learning outcomes, but also potentially to teach, or also to particularly revise material, to spend time looking at things that one had already talked about in a new kind of setting in order to get the facts to stick. So those were the goals. I wanted a versatile game that could be played at different levels and for different outcomes, and I wanted it to be fun and promote teamwork and be a tool that we could use. So I applied for some seed money in 2021, and then set about creating a game idea. And I had obviously thoughts related to, because they're both science pedagogy games, so the ones that teach an actual scientific concept, and then there are kind of science-based games which use a scientific concept kind of loosely in the game, but the game is mostly there for fun. And I had to consider, what was I really doing? Did I want this? The purpose, was it to be to learn something new? Was it to assess learning outcomes, or was it mostly to do something fun and different and engaging and learning different skill sets? And did I have to choose between those two when I made this game? So I came up with the kind of basic idea. Then I ran a discussion with a student group, so bachelor, master students. I just emailed out randomly and had a group join in. And I discussed the idea with them, what they thought about it, what they thought about the idea as it was at that point. And together we kind of came up with some improvements on, we'll get into that later, but the action and activity squares that we have in this game. And then I designed a board game, and I had to find someone to draw it. I did that locally. I used a postdoc who's very, very good with drawing programs here at Oslo University. And then together, so we've made the kind of at least the first version of this game. So the current status of Geologic right now is to play away, and then kind of maybe assess a little bit. Is it working? Are there problems? Do we need to amend it, change it in any way, or is it does it work in the way we wanted it to work as of today? So this is the board game that we came up with. So it's called Geologic. I thought that was a very nice name for a geological board game. And as you can see, it's based both kind of on the spiral of geological time, but also shaped quite nicely like an ammonite to also bring in a geological concept. So this, I'll just run you now through how this game is actually played, how we can use it. So game version 1, the very basic game version, really is for anyone. So this you can play when you're 3, 5, 7, 10, 14 years old, if you want to. And this is, of course, so that it's a tool one can use on Geologiens dag, or at school visits, if they come to visit universities and so on. You can just have it as a fun thing. And the idea, of course, is that you learn a little bit maybe about the concept of geological time and some of the main geological events and when they happened, and retain a little bit of that information. So what you do is, of course, you walk through geological time, and then you end up landing on these action squares, the little ones with the volcanoes on. And these are actual geological events set in their geological time. For example, of course, in the late Cretaceous, the death of the dinosaurs, and then sad event. So you have to go back 3 steps. And of course, the goal is to go from start to the end of geological time, and the first person to get there wins. The game version 2 is the one where we include the question squares. And then when you land on a question square, you have to answer a question obviously correctly in order to move on. So this is a tool you can use in a classroom setting. You can actually use both the question and activity squares for questions if you want. That way you have many more question squares. And this is where you can use this to at the end of a class or at the end of a course to revise material, or check if students have retained material or if they've achieved their learning goals in a very kind of fun and calm and non-stressful setting. In game version 3, this is the one where we play in teams, and this one is really where if you are looking more, even more, I should say, towards kind of having team building, fun, in a setting maybe where you're away on a field course and you want to do something with the students in the evening. So you play this in teams, and then there is the third type of square, the activity square. And if you land on that, you can either make your own, or you can use these ones that are shown here, which are pre-made. The person who lands, or the team that lands on that square, rolls the dice twice. The first roll decides which of the terms you have to try and make your team guess. And the second roll describes which way you have to try and do this. So, for example, with charades, this can be, obviously the idea here is that some are very easy and some are very difficult. And that's kind of what is part of the fun. Describe it without using the words, draw it blindfolded. Assembling, which can be using anything you have available. So maybe you have to construct it with, people nearby. It's good to have also physical contact with people to build a good team. And then trying to spell it backwards within, of course, a certain amount of time. And this, you can also just make your own cards with any geological terms you come up with, or even obviously non-geological terms if you'd rather. We have been working here with some kind of Pictionary-like ideas when we've been doing classes, and because it's actually really interesting to see if students can draw some concepts, because it really shows how well they understand it. So it's actually a good tool to assess as well. So the flexibility of the gameplay is obviously that the questions are designed by the teacher, so the game master, as it were. And for that, you can kind of match any level of where the students are, and any kind of need. If you're more towards teaching or learning or revision, or assessing learning outcomes, and of course within any subject matter. So you can do this for any course or any class. And this means that the questions that you design can be, really short, true or false, multiple choice, single one-worded answers, or you can become really creative with this depending on where your students are, at what level they are. It can be, conceptual, analytical, mathematical, kind of depending on Bloom's taxonomy. And the level of the students, you can ask them to, explain something and draw it on the board, and then really get a good understanding of if they have learned it or not. And as I said, it's really designed to meet different needs, and that's where you can kind of design gameplay as you were. Originally, I think I decided that this was a good way of assessing if my students had achieved their learning outcomes, and instead of a quiz or pointing at a student and saying, "Do you know this?" This is very non-confrontational. It's fun. It's easy. The students don't really know that they're in a way being assessed. They're just enjoying it, and it's a tool for you as a teacher. You can also use it for revision, so towards the end of the course, and then revisit lots of topics that you've already talked about. Again, you're both assessing how much the students have learned, but also revising material. We know that learning things takes time. So if the students didn't learn it the first time, while you're talking about it and explaining it and using it as part of the game, they get a chance to learn it. You can obviously teach concepts and higher level skills by applying skills and analyzing and evaluating when you're doing this in a more kind of complex setting. If you have a course that's not working well, if they're not talking to each other, if you have cliques forming, if it's difficult for them to work together as a group, it's a great icebreaker to get students to talk to each other, enhance their group dynamic. And that's both between peer and peer, and between for you to kind of get to know and relate your students. So peer to teacher wise, I think it's a really great kind of tool. Generally, it's of course, if you do something that's more active and engaging, it kind of runs through in the rest of the classes when you do this. So hopefully you're kind of creating a really good classroom that promotes active learning anyway. We know that students learn through different approaches. So the idea of maybe having seeing, hearing, drawing, creating, thinking in kind of a different format will enhance learning as well. Obviously, having fun is a really good thing. Sometimes students are, bored and tired. It's good to get them engaged, enthusiastic about the subject. You get up, you move about, you get oxygen to your brain. So lots of different good things related to playing games during class. So the materials and things are all going to be made available. There's of course the playing board, which can be printed either big or small. The game instructions are quite short, but I've written them up, and they can also, we'll put them on some sort of platform. You can download them. Activity cards also, you can also just design your own. Those are just the ones with the geological terms. A set of questions needs to be designed by either the teacher or the players themselves can send in, and that makes it even more active for them, of course. You need a dice, and you need pieces to move around on your board. If you have a very big one, the students themselves can walk around on it. If you have a small one, I would suggest, for example, using different rocks and minerals, which makes it even more fun geologically. So I printed one version in 4x4, which was quite ambitious because that's really big, it turns out. So you need a fair bit of space, but it's also quite amusing because it really is the perfect size, as you can see by my socks down there to the right, for a person to stand on a square when they're playing. And of course, it's much more fun to be up and about and active when you do this. It also really, brings it home as you walk through geological time. It's also nice to have a really big dice. So that's a foam dice you can buy for 99 crowns. and I think that's more amusing for everyone. But you can also just, obviously play it on a desk. So as I said, this is kind of where we are now with this game. We have a lot of questions left to answer. We have to start playing the game and seeing if it works. I don't know if it's a good length of play or if it takes too long, depending on how many players or groups you have. I don't know if the subdivision of action, activity, and question squares is good if there's too many or too few of some of them. Obviously, is it actually fun and amusing to play? That one remains to be answered. And then, of course, there's to ascertain whether this has some sort of pedagogic value or if you just waste a lot of time having fun in class. So can we use it? Can we actually use it to teach anything, or can we mainly use it to revise? And can we, as I initially said, the idea was to use it to assess learning outcomes. So the idea now is, of course, to try and play this game in a few different settings, have some trial runs, and see if we need to make any revisions to it. All right, so I'll wrap up with just a little bit of, the positives and negatives with respect to playing games in a classroom setting. So using kind of game-based learning has grown lately as we've moved away from, of course, as we all know, the more traditional instruction of just the lecturer talking and talking and talking. So we go now towards more interactive collaborative methods, and gameplay is one of them. There are lots of different ones that are used in higher education, of course, simulations and virtual environments and alternative realities and these things where you actually try and kind of play doing a job or doing something. But there's also the board games, which are sort of the social and cooperative games. And in general, it's quite positive. Students are positive to it. It tends to reduce test anxiety if they get to play games and practice things beforehand. It increases their motivation to learning. The versions that are available to everyone make science accessible and interesting to public. And what I like as well is that not just the fact that students are kind of encouraged and motivated, but typically I like the idea of graceful failure, which is where, it doesn't matter if you get it wrong, you're not getting deducted off a test. You just didn't answer the question. Your team wasn't able to move forward a step, and that's a bummer, but it's not a big problem. And of course, I mean, games motivate people. A lot of people are motivated to win. There are a lot of people who like winning. So you kind of can engage your students, and they have a goal. So this like a kind of positive competition, which also has a lot of good effects on teamwork, collaboration, and communication, and so on. So as I said, the main goals with Geologic were one, to have fun, to do something different, engaging, enthuse your students in geology, to kind of get a better group dynamic, teamwork, a kind of sense of community within the classroom, which I think is really important. And I think that leads to a much better learning environment. So anything that promotes that, I'm a big supporter of. And then the final one, to use it as a tool to kind of assess learning outcomes and or either teach and particularly revise material that's already been visited. Having fun in the classroom. The desired effect of creating a classroom with enthusiasm is that you get intrinsically motivated students. So ones that are essentially alert, energized, eager to learn without any reward, safe enjoyment of it, which is, of course, something we all strive to do. We want to make learning fun, and enthusiasm is contagious. So if your students are having fun and they're engaged and alert, they're more likely to learn more. A setback of doing something like this is, of course, that it does require participation, and not all students are very happy with participating. Some prefer to sit back and just listen. This idea of building a sense of community, having a good rapport both between peers and between teacher and peers, is something I personally favor. I think it's really important. I think it makes for a really good classroom, good learning environment. When you have that supportive environment and where students feel kind of seen and heard and part of a group, they're more likely to engage in active learning, and it's more likely that they will learn more material. And of course, the idea of doing something that aids even just a little bit in collaborating and communicating and teamwork. We don't just, of course, build geology skills at university. We build skills that are needed for the rest of life. So these are skills that are useful anyway. Setbacks. Not all groups are going to work very well as a team. I've worked in a lot of different settings before working at university, and there are some groups which are really difficult to get to work, get to collaborate, and maybe you can't achieve a classroom setting where everyone is happy and engaged and working well together. And of course, maybe creating this rapport when in a very informal classroom could potentially be problematic if it's too informal. And then finally, using this as an assessment and teaching tool. I think it's probably a good way of kind of assessing how much learning has been achieved if you want to check in on your students. And as I said before, there's no detrimental grade to this. There's this kind of graceful failure in a very relaxed setting, which is good. It's not very resource intensive to do this as assessment. And you can also, as I said, use your students to create the question, so it becomes even more student centered. They can even run this, of course, themselves while they're revising. And it's a forum for feedback. You can, students are able to kind of gauge what level they're at. As a teacher, you can provide immediate feedback on how a student has done or this. And of course, feedback is important for your students' learning, and particularly this kind of formative feedback that this would be. Some setbacks obviously here is that with the questions, you're not assessing all the students on all of the questions. You'll be one or a group, or if someone knows something, so you get a very small sampling. You don't get an idea of if your entire group has understood and followed something. And of course, my question here is it more, can you more use this as an assessment tool, or is there any way to actually generate learning while using this game? So that was pretty much Geologic. I did a little Mentimeter for this little sampling that we have here, but I'm just interested. Let me see if I can just switch this around. If I bring this in here. Can we see that, or do I need to share my screen again? Oh, new share, here we go. All right, so I just have 2 slides for you here. One on to get some inspiration for what the best board games out there are. It works, excellent. None? That's sad. Shoots and ladders. Yeah, settlers. I like settlers too. Risk. All right. And my second one here is just some thoughts on Geologic as a tool, or as a fun game, or as a whatever we might consider it to be. Just spontaneous. I just wanted to get an idea of some spontaneous thoughts on the use of a board game such as Geologic in a classroom setting. And of course, you can also just pop in the chat if you think there's something I've forgotten there, but I thought I'd cool. I think I will pop that down. And that was actually all I had to say today about Geologic and geological board games. So thank you very much for listening.